will be exploring two principles of art, the principles of rhythm and repetition. Repetition, rhythm, and pattern, which we will be exploring separately, are the principles of the multiple. How do we deal with multiples of an object to create or send a message or to draw the eye along? Very briefly overviewing, repetition is all about just the multiple, unadulterated as it is, and how that can be utilized. Pattern is all about the multiple of objects wherein variety is introduced, yet it still behaves in a predictable way. And rhythm is all about how multiples can operate in a dynamic manner, how multiples can be used to include movement and to really push visual interest and variety. So repetition, as we said before, is the copying of an element over and over again. Consider how Dohosu uses the repetition of these small little figurines over and over again to give you a sense of the mindset, not of the individual, but of the community. Many of his pieces explore the community of people uplifting things like a monument, which is a symbol of either victory or government or establishment, but also how those pieces can be used to uplift a sheet of glass that can hold you, the audience. So how have the many that have come before you or that stand unnamed can be used to uplift the individual? Rhythm is an effect achieved when an element of art is repeated in such a way that it simulates movement. Here in La Danse, we see HENRI Matisse repeating the same red-skinned figures, but he has repeated them in such a way that each of their individual movements is not predictable, and therefore it draws your eye across the canvas in a similar way to the motions of a dance. So that circular motion that your eyes go through as they flow from one figure to the next is a similar motion to the actual movements that the people are portraying in the canvas. Repetition is often an indicator that a work is static. It does not indicate action because nothing about it really changes, so there's no implications of motion. Rhythm, though, often indicates a work that is dynamic. It gives that illusion of movement because it is unpredictable, and it forces your eye to go to the next thing in order to see what happens. You don't automatically just know, you have to see it in order to understand it. Now, these objects, the Untitled sculptures by Judd, are these better examples of repetition, or are they better examples of rhythm? And how do you know? Are they static or are they dynamic? Is it being changed over time or is it not being changed over the course of space? Now, Andy Warhol in particular used repetition in many of his prints to draw comparisons to the uniformity of commercial advertising. He went against many conventions of fine art in his repetitive works. The idea that works of art should be unique. The idea that works of art should even be original. His soup can prints, while not particularly unique in any of its distinguishing figures, help to recreate that feeling of being in a grocery store, walking down the aisle with an endless repetition of the same objects for you to choose from. And for Warhol, this was an important point that he wanted to communicate. He was really interested in the ability of a post-industrial age world to give the same experience to somebody no matter where they lived in the world. Andy Warhol thought it was fascinating that today or in 5 years in Chicago or in Mobile, Alabama, you can go to a grocery store and you can buy a can of chicken soup from Campbell's and it will taste the same, no matter where you are, no matter who you are. It's a uniform experience that was never available to anybody before the industrial age because there was no way to control ingredients or processes in such a complete way before then. Now, rhythm is often achieved through the careful placement of repeated components which invite that viewer's eye to move from one to the next. Now, I may know that at some point in this composition, after that last green rectangle, that another blue triangle is coming, but I don't necessarily know that it's the next thing. It could just as easily be a yellow triangle, or a purple rectangle, or a red circle. Now, I know it has to be one of those things more than likely, but which one it actually is, I will not know until I actually see it. Notice how each figure in this Etruscan tomb dances in their own style. While we definitely know that each one is a person, that person will be dressed in a toga of some sort, and that person will be dancing in some sort of fashion, each one is caught in a different action that implies movement, and what the next one will look like is not 100% predictable. In the fall of Phaeton, the layering of figures on top of one another, each going in a diagonal towards the apex of the heat, towards the rays of light, helps to create a feeling of movement, of dynamism, and of chaos. In Edvard Munch's The Scream, we find this pulsating rhythm created by those varied strokes in Munch's work. There is a definite sense of order to the space and the placement of things, but at the same time, it feels like it is pulsating, like it is alive through that regular yet not quite predictable application of brushstrokes. This helps to further cement that feeling that Munch felt the day of this particular sunset, the day when he felt as if he'd heard a scream run across nature, and he has visually represented that through this use of rhythm. And even in action painting, in this seemingly totally random style, there is rhythmic feeling. Those splotches and blobs of color almost turn into a lyrical kind of text or composition. And even though Jackson Pollock was trying to make artworks that weren't based out of any composition of his mind, the rhythm of his arm swings and his own unique gestures that he was used to making are actually so identifiable that art historian experts can differentiate between a fake and a real Pollock based on the known rhythms that he creates through the use of his arms. So why don't you take a moment now, and as a last exercise for today, explore how this artwork fulfills the definition of rhythm. How can you see elements or principles repeating themselves in such a way that your eyes are guided along and you feel a sense of motion?